I welcome you yet again to another CA monthly press conference, as been stated by the spokeswoman, in which CA would normally maintain its engagement with the larger society and specifically address current or potential issues of critical importance to the people of the Gambia. Our party leader, Dr. Ismaila Ceesay, has traveled outside of the territory and therefore cannot be here with you, as has always been the case. However, CA is an institution and therefore belongs to the party and nation, and each one will be available as and when needed to fulfill any party or national interest or imperative in accordance with his or her abilities. In this sense, and because CA is not a one-person institution, I shall conduct this press conference as national president with the assistance of our spokeswoman. So once again, you are most welcome. Today we shall address two very important contemporary issues, as stated already: the current worsening and worrisome national security situation, and the voter registration to begin on the 29th of May 2021, as disclosed by the IEC. After this short address, you shall traditionally ask questions, not necessarily on the two issues alone, but on anything that is of interest to you. Let me join all Gambians to pray for divine guidance in how we as a nation shall extricate ourselves from the deteriorating formation process that our children are going through, and the result of which is that many of them who would have otherwise been most useful in contributing to the development of Mother Gambia have become what we are unaccustomed to as a people. The Gambia is fast becoming a nation in which even during daytime, one would need to be vigilant about your environment. We Gambians have never known this. We have taken our peace and security for granted in the past, since it is only in the Gambia that at night you would find or meet with female tourists walking along unlit roads, such as the Haman Minor Road, or popularly known as the Senegambia Road, without worry of any threat to their lives. That someone broke into someone else's house and left with anything was big news, even in the urban areas. What then has happened that now our own children would at night break into our or their neighbors' homes, beat them up, and in some cases even murder them to do away with their properties? What has happened? What has happened? This is a question that the Gambian needs to ask, needs to reflect upon deeply and take steps to resolve. The solution to this is not linear and will require the participation of all of us in the country. Government will need to take policy making very seriously for the first time in the history of this country. Those responsible for these atrocities are our youths. And our government has a very well-articulated youth policy, on which cover page is stated, and I quote, "We cannot always create the world for our youths, but we can create our youths for the world." This was a quotation from the NCIS Naval Criminal Investigation Service TV program. That as a nation, you cannot manipulate the world. You have to exist within the context of the world. But you have one opportunity. The opportunity is creating your youth so that they fit the dynamism of the world. So youths are not an accident. They are created by us, the people of the country. The question at the moment is, what type of youths are we creating for the world in the Gambia? This presupposes that our youths are a result of the formation processes our children undergo from birth to age 15, when they graduate into the youth cohort of 15 to 35 years. This includes our educational programs and social and religious upbringing, all of which together enables the formation which seeks to establish a holistic and harmonious youth cohort that is imbued with adequate knowledge and competencies, strong professional ethics, spiritual and moral values, and a level of independence, patriotism, and commitment that gives them life options to choose development and progress in alignment with the national vision. And this is the mission statement of the National Youth Policy. That is what the Gambia is out to do for the youth. The Gambia is out to establish a holistic and harmonious youth cohort, 15 to 35. And that youth cohort will have the capacity, the knowledge, the competencies, the professional ethics, the spiritual and moral upbringing, and a level of independence, patriotism, and commitment that will give them life options. That means they will be able to choose what they want to do. They will not just do what they would be doing because they have no other option. They will have options because of this overall formation that they have gone through. Okay? Now, policies such as this, that is the youth policy, if these were initiated and evolved or derived by ourselves, Gambians, by our government, our people, from real national socio-economic concerns, they should have found their way into national development programming and budgeting. So they should have been invested in to render at every point in time the destination of the process for forming youths. That is, if they were inculcated and adapted into our budgetary framework, then most of those youths who are now plundering other people's properties and lives would not have been doing that. They would have had the moral, the professional, the knowledge, and the technical capacity to choose not to do that. But what is happening today is they are doing that because they have not chosen. They are not doing it not because they have chosen to do that, but they have no choice but to do that. So something is really wrong. However, our youth policy, again, very functionally elaborates the destination where we want to take our youth. That's its vision statement. You know, a vision statement is a destination statement. That is, come 2028, when the current youth policy would have elapsed and will be required to be reviewed, we would have had youths that are empowered and rendered capable and willing to make well-informed, sustainable, and meaningful life choices. That's what vision is saying. So for you to have a person like that, the person must have been very well trained, very well comported, so that the person has equipment, cognitive and technical equipment, to be able to make a choice in his life, an informed choice. Of course, going to plunder people's properties and kill people are not informed choices. So have we therefore rendered the Gambian youth capable and willing to make well-informed choices and meaningful life choices? This is not supported by the evidence coming from what is happening now. It is not. So something is wrong. If because as is, this situation needs to be managed, we Gambians must manage ourselves out of it. We have no choice, we have to. And render our country once again a peace haven. However, it is worthy to note that in doing that, and having followed the issue with concern, CA thinks that there is need to rely on accurate evidence of the phenomenon and determine the what, the why, and the how to resolve this undesirable situation. In determining why this is happening, the number and variety of crimes need to be established. And if possible, the geographical and age distribution of the crimes and culprits also need to be established. A lot can be learned from this, and it can provide an effective basis of establishing why these crimes are taking place and are in the increase. There is need to understand the factors such as the social underlinings to these activities and the reasons for the seemingly ineffective policing to stop these crimes. It must be recognized that in a situation of over 40% youth unemployment and the lack of appropriate training and tools for policing in contemporary times, our police have no choice but become, like all other ordinary citizens, bystanders to the phenomenon. That is catastrophic, when the police are bystanders to crime. Not because they have chosen to be bystanders, because they cannot do anything about it, as a result of the inappropriate nature of the training and equipping that they have received in order to be able to fight contemporary crimes. In addition to the need for formidable formation process for our children through education and social enlightenment systems, we need to address hopelessness that has been brought about by economic stagnation and lack of meaningful employment. Security begins with hopefulness. Where there is hope, there is life. But if there is hopelessness, that you might not even complete education because you cannot afford it, that even if you complete a certain level of education, you might not be able to get a job because the economy is not growing. And so that's real hopelessness. One begins to second guess yourself in terms of who you really are and who you might be. So we need to introspect on some of the following as Gambians. One, what is happening today does not give us comfort that youth policy was driven by concern by Gambians when it was evolved, but that it was led by donors to whom this is more of a concern than our own government. So we need to introspect policy development and policy design to be evolved by Gambians, not to be supported financially and technically by donors. Then the narrative has changed. We will never be able to address the specific issues bedeviling our societies. Two, what is happening now seems to amplify the belief that our government does not understand their own policy. And if they do, then they do not have the intention to commit resources into its implementation, because the policy is not programmed financially. If it was so important for you to evolve a policy like that for the youth, the most important cohort of the labor force in the country, then it should be important to you to provide for it. Three, what is happening now seems to illustrate the fact that our police force is ill-trained to contain the sophistication of the crimes and the ferocity of the criminals. Yesterday I watched something that was sent to me, and I was advised that you have to watch, because if you think that you have formidably provided security around your house, what they will do is they bring, what do you call it? They put some chemical elements on your wall.
Oh, acid, yeah.
Acid on your wall. On a consistent basis, the wall loses its strength, and easily they will just come and knock it, and it will open, and they will have access to your place. That's brilliant. But that brilliance could have been directed to something more productive.
Positive.
You know? So what is happening now shows that there is need to revisit our economic growth policies. Economic growth and prosperity is security. To ensure adequate growth and distribution through such as jobs and other socially inclined public investments. And also, if not properly addressed, our children will be self-raised. If these issues are not properly addressed, our children will be self-raised in what is normally called in Wolof yar sabop. And only God can determine what happens to self-raised children. Some of them end up very well, but most of them don't. And we cannot determine that. May God in His infinite mercy help all of us. Fellow Gambians, we must now help ourselves. And this means holding government accountable for every insecurity incident that takes place. Now, There is no need to continue crying helplessly. It is government that has the responsibility to ensure that this stops now and that it does not have the potency to re-emerge. Since it is first and foremost a result of either their ignorance or unwillingness to take appropriate action. I shall now address the second issue of today's press conference, the voter registration. I shall address all Gambians directly. Fellow Gambians, the time has come for a decision for the next turn of our lives as a nation through the empowerment of parties and giving responsibility to people for being at the helm of governance in our nation. What this means is that these people to whom you, the people, give the responsibility must be obligated to utilize all the available natural resources at their disposal. These resources include people and skills, natural gifts such as rain, minerals, and etc., and money, just to name a few, to fashion policies and to structure mechanisms to fund and to grow an economy that will be sufficient for everybody to be comfortable. That's all we need. We don't have to have an economy where everybody is a multi-billionaire. I don't think there is any country, even Brunei is not like that, in the world that is like that. This is where security is first rendered in a nation. Security is rendered in a nation through economic prosperity, first and foremost. Of course, there is white-collar crime. Crimes that the only people who will commit them are the rich. But those are social outliers. Our system should be able to take care of those, but they will be in the minority. But the tendency now is that, in fact, the social outliers in crime are becoming the majority. How can we live in a nation like that? An economy that is sufficient to enable all to feel secured and unwilling to resort to crime and to access comfort is an economy that promises real security. This is where security is first rendered in a nation. A country that grows and its wealth fairly distributed is a secure and peaceful country. And I need us to know that. Fellow Gambians, this can only be achieved when we as a people take the process of assessing our own brothers and sisters who have volunteered for leadership and critically voting in those that we know have what it takes in cognitive adequacy and moral and social commitment to bring about economic growth and its fair distribution. That is what December 4th is for. This is what is going to happen on the 4th of December 2021, and for which reason we have been scheduled to register and qualify ourselves to vote. When you register and you have a voter's card, you've not even made the choice yet. You've not made the decisions yet. You've not assigned obligation to any group of people yet. You only qualify to make the decision, to participate in the decision-making process. Meaning to make this very important judgment. Therefore, registering as a voter is the most important thing for anyone that calls himself or herself a patriotic citizen. And I guess all Gambians are patriotic citizens. Please, let us manifest our patriotism in going en masse and ensuring that once we qualify and we are Gambians and we are constitutionally qualified to vote, let's go and get registered. And let's go on the 4th of December and all the other following elections and vote. This is where development begins. Our party leader, Dr. Ismaila Sise, have asked me to appeal, if need be, to all of you to go out and register to vote. This is an appeal from our party leader. So that come 4th December 2021, you'll be able to vote. And not only vote, you'll be able to redeem our country from the apparent insecurity that we are going through, the apparent poverty that we are going through, the apparent hopelessness that is part of our being. All you need in order to register as a voter is simple. All you need to show includes a national ID card, a Gambian passport, an attestation from an alcalo or a chief, and a Gambian birth certificate. If you are a Gambian, it should be extremely simple for you to get at least one of those. So not to register because you do not have any of these, it's a choice, it's a personal choice. And of course, one hopes that when one is making a choice, you make a choice that is to your supreme personal interest. And a choice that is to your supreme personal interest is the choice to ensure that this country's governance is put in proper hands. And that only begins with you being able to make that choice, and that is get a voter's registration, a voter's card. It is really easy and accessible. And all that remains to be done is that we must understand that to register and to vote are obligations to us as citizens. Please let all the youths of this country, from Koina to Khartoum, register. Remember, the brunt of difficulty in any nation squares on the heads of the youth. The insecurity that is being talked about, the culprits for the insecurity, and eventually the people who will suffer as a result of the insecurity are you, the youths. And therefore, as a youth party, CA intends to make sure it brings back hope to all and sundry, especially the youth. And in so doing, we are requesting and appealing to all of you youths not to allow any reason for you not to be able to register to vote in the elections that are yet to come. The schedule has been issued by the IEC, and CA shall continue working very hard as part of our outreach programs and working also with the IEC to ensure that everybody who is qualified and eligible to register to vote across the country is registered. Everybody. Because this is the only way that we can ultimately and genuinely address the ills of this country, the ills of insecurity and hopelessness. Fellow Gambians, thank you very much for your attention.
I just want to highlight a few things that Mr. Dominic Mendy said here, which are very, very important and I think needs a lot of emphasis. Youth are not an accident, he said. Our youth are the most important cohort in our workforce. We really need to make a lot of emphasis on that. We have a very, very large youth population. We need to harness the potential in our youth to help this country develop. Without it, we won't go anywhere. And I just want to emphasize more on that by saying I had a statement from Pope Francis who said, our youth are not the future as we normally call them, but our youth, they are our today, they are our now, they are our current. Thus, we need to put a lot of importance, attach a lot of importance and take care of our youth. Because if we don't take care of our youth, we tend to fail as a nation. And with all these issues happening in this country, I think you will all agree with me, we have failed in harnessing the potential of our youth. Thus, this is the ripple effect. Again, Dominic said, security begins with hope. There is a lot of hopelessness in this country. You talk to our youth, they will tell you they don't know what the future holds for them because there is no hope per se. They don't have jobs. They cannot take care of themselves. They cannot help anybody. So again, the easiest way out is to take things into their own hands. And we don't want a country to be run that way. Without much ado, I want you guys here, our media, our partners, to start asking your questions. Like Mr. Dominic said, it doesn't have to be limited to these two issues that we talked about. It can be anything, and we'll do our best to answer it. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, I guess that is exactly that's the crux of my address. You probably were looking at me very closely because I'm very handsome, so you didn't hear most of what I said. Or you like this nice hair. But let me say this. What I have just said is that one thing is evident to have failed, is the lack of embrace by government of the youth policy. A very vibrant and a very well-structured youth policy. Now, when I say lack of embrace, it means when you develop a policy, you have to implement the policy. How do you implement a policy? You now review the policy and ask yourself, what does the policy say is at stake about youths? You know, it elaborates all of that. Then it provides what must be done. So what must be done are the areas in which government must invest. And when you say government invest, it means now you will determine which area has been identified as needing something to be done, and you identify what it is that has been detailed to be done. So if the area is in agriculture, if it is in education, are you with me? If it is in sports, if it is in all of these, then you are now beginning to assign responsibility to different sectors, isn't it? Ministry of Education, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Youth, Ministry of Sports. You understand what I'm trying to say? And then the detail of it would now say X, Y, Z needs to be done in education. If it is not already done, then that means education should now be restructured so that will be introduced as part of their operational structure. So it must be budgeted for now, and it must be taken to Parliament, and Parliament must approve to assign money for that to be implemented. Are you with me? If it is something that has already been done, maybe it is not being done very effectively, so it needs to be dynamized, it needs to be expanded. So that means more resources, and when we say resources, it's money, yes, but it's also people and equipment and and more logistics and more reach and more scope. So that needs to happen. So that is what has failed. So that is what CA will do, because that is how you run a country. Because once you do that, you have actually established an infrastructure, a national infrastructure, to address the youth problem. But for as long as you do not do that and you continue just talking about it, you've not done anything. Establishing an infrastructure is identifying the infrastructure, structuring it, and financing it. Once that happens, you have people, then you now begin to monitor and evaluate. You see the contribution to the economy? That is security. So if there are no jobs, because the economy is not growing, and when you want a job, you cannot get a job, all you can do is stay home and sleep, and if you are lucky, you may ataya nganan ko, so lucky would bes bobu ataya amul, eventually so ataya teglante amut, you end up saying, look, ataya bi tay fum jaram. So Dominic di romba daf ñoo jox ataya o ñu def ko leneen. Is that not insecurity? That is insecurity. So these are and then at the same time you will still revisit the police training infrastructure. The training, the inculcation of the values of policing, but also the equipping of policing. Because at whatever security level you are in the world, if in the most secure country, has a policing system. Because there will always be crime of some sort. But you have to be able to train your people and develop them as you go on to be able to respond to changing dynamics in crime. So that is exactly what CA is going to do, because you have to address the root cause of insecurity. I hope I'm clear. Thank you. Now you've made a statement. I am not sure whether you know that it's supposed to be a statement of fact. You say no more than 1% is invested in youths. And I take that to mean that for you, investment in youth means the apportionment of the budget to the Ministry of Youth and Sports.
Which is not only for youths alone.
I agree. But let me tell you, what we need to do as a nation is not to say that no more than 1% is invested in youth. It's to find out how much money is invested in youth. Because really as a nation, we don't know how much money is invested in youth. And let me give you an idea. Let me just take one or two ministries. If you go to Ministry of Tourism and Culture, 75% of the workforce in the tourism subsector is youth. Are you with me? Huh? It's youth. It's music, the arts, it's all youth. So you can actually reference the greater proportion of the apportionment of the budget to tourism and culture as investment in youth. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? So your policy should be structured in such a way that if that is investment in youth, you have to optimize it in such a way that music becomes a big industry, that football and sports become big industries, so that we are able to supply the kinds of Ronaldo and Messi, so that every year the remittances from sports professionals outside of the Gambia will become a significant proportion of the inflows of foreign currency. So you see, now if you go to agriculture, about 50% of the investment in agriculture is directed to youth. So what our problem is, again, is policy. We have not been able to understand what it is that is constituted as investment in youth, so that we structure and manage it in such a way that we distribute the youths into these areas and support them. And once they are supported and are involved and active in these areas, naturally they will not see crime. If you understand what I'm saying. Yeah. So that's it. So it's just to correct that perception.
I just want to highlight the issue why I raised that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let's look more specifically. This current government, when it talks about its prior or what it has achieved for youth, points to YEP, for example. And we all know for YEP that was what, 11 million euros? Invested in youth. We want to see the Gambian youth need similar investment, not only from outsiders. This is why I'm asking you to commit, to give us something tangible.
Okay.
Because
absolutely, I'm coming.
We agree, because when the government talks about youth, they don't highlight agriculture. We all agree, youth is cross-cutting, certainly. But we want specific, tangible things.
So given that broader understanding of the investments in youth, and given the establishment of how public
because with the fact that the system, let me say that in confidence, has failed us for the past 24 years or so, let's say since we wins our independence from the British. But in concrete terms, what have you identified, I mean CA, to be the main problem of this government from inception? Because money has not been the issue. EU has just announced they have pumped in 6.8 billion Gambian dollars since Barrow came to office. And we have been following the tracks of the GRA. Even last month, they collected $1 billion in just 1 month. So the money has been there over the past 5 years. So what have you identified to be the main problem?
I guess it's the same thing. You are busy looking at this very handsome man. Huh? Now let me say this. The problem is formation. F-O-R-M-A-T-I-O-N. And the easiest and the most direct interpretation of formation mooy yar gi. You understand what I mean? Yar gi, you know, yar nit du dóor ko. Yar nit mooy teete ko ba moo doon xaleel. Di grow ba mu doon mag munal boppam. Solatu di yar. So yar means